Unexpected encounter. The vastness of space stretched out before Captain Ilara Chen as she guided her small exploration vessel, the Stargazer, through the uncharted regions of the Andromeda Galaxy. The ship's engines hummed softly, a comforting white noise that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat over the years of solo missions. Ilara's dark eyes scanned the holographic displays, searching for anything of interest among the sea of stars. It had been months since she'd last made contact with Earth, and the solitude was beginning to wear on her. But she was a scientist first and foremost, driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe and its secrets. A sudden beeping from her console jolted her from her reverie. Ilara leaned forward, her heart rate quickening as she realized what she was seeing. Unidentified planet detected, the ship's AI announced in its calm, modulated voice. Atmosphere composition suggests potential for life. Well, I'll be damned, Ilara muttered, a grin spreading across her face. This was exactly the kind of discovery she'd been hoping for. AI, set course for the planet. Let's take a closer look. As the Stargazer entered the planet's orbit, Ilara's excitement grew. The world below was a swirl of blues and greens, reminiscent of Earth, but with subtle differences that hinted at its alien nature. Dense forests covered much of the landmass, interspersed with vast plains and winding rivers. No signs of advanced civilization detected, the AI reported after running a series of scans. However, there are anomalous energy readings coming from a location in the northern hemisphere. Ilara's eyebrows furrowed. Anomalous how? The energy signature does not match any known natural phenomena. It appears to be artificial in origin. This was getting more interesting by the minute. Ilara plotted a course for the coordinates of the energy signature, guiding the Stargazer down through the planet's atmosphere. As they descended, she could make out more details of the landscape. The trees below were unlike anything she'd seen before, with iridescent leaves that shimmered in the light of the planet's twin suns. The ship touched down in a small clearing near the source of the energy readings. Ilara double-checked her environment suit, making sure all seals were secure before she opened the airlock. The first breath of alien air filled her lungs as she stepped onto the surface of the unknown world. The gravity was slightly less than Earth's, giving her steps a subtle bounce. She looked around, taking in the alien landscape with wonder. The grass beneath her feet was a deep indigo, and strange, bioluminescent insects flitted through the air. Ilara activated her handheld scanner and began moving in the direction of the energy signature. As she pushed through the underbrush, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder. After about an hour of trekking through the alien forest, Ilara emerged into another clearing. What she saw there made her stop dead in her tracks. In the center of the clearing was a crashed spacecraft, its design unlike anything in the human database. The ship's hull was a sleek, organic shape that seemed to flow like liquid metal. It was clearly damaged, with a large gash running along one side and debris scattered around the impact site. But it wasn't the ship itself that caused Ilara's breath to catch in her throat. It was the figure lying motionless on the ground nearby. The alien was humanoid in shape, but that's where the similarities ended. Its skin was a pale, iridescent blue that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Instead of hair, a crest of feather-like appendages adorned its head. The alien's face was delicate and androgynous, with large, almond-shaped eyes currently closed. Ilara approached cautiously, her heart pounding. This was first contact, something she dreamed about but never truly expected to experience. As she got closer, she could see that the alien was injured. A dark, viscous fluid that she assumed was blood was seeping from a wound on its side. "Hello," Ilara called out softly, knowing the alien probably wouldn't understand but hoping her tone would convey her peaceful intentions. "Can you hear me?" The alien's eyes snapped open, revealing irises that swirled with colors like an opal. It let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a chirp, trying to scramble away from Ilara, but wincing in pain at the movement. Ilara held up her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "It's okay," she said soothingly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help." The alien's gaze darted between Ilara and its crashed ship, clearly torn between fear of the unknown human and the need for assistance. Ilara slowly reached for the medical kit attached to her belt, making her movements as non-threatening as possible. "Look," she said, holding up a tube of universal sealant, a medical miracle that could temporarily close almost any type of wound. "This can help stop the bleeding. Will you let me?" The alien's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of understanding passing across its features. After a moment of hesitation, it gave a small nod. Ilara approached slowly, kneeling beside the injured alien. Up close, she could see the intricacy of its skin patterns, swirls and dots that seemed to pulse faintly with bioluminescence. She gently applied the sealant to the wound, watching in fascination as it adapted to the alien physiology, stemming the flow of the strange, dark blood. As she worked, Ilara spoke softly, more to fill the silence than anything else. "My name is Ilara. I'm a human from a planet called Earth. I'm an explorer, like you, I think." She gestured towards the crashed ship. "I'm sorry about your vessel. Maybe we can figure out a way to repair it." The alien watched her intently, head tilted slightly as if trying to decipher her words. When Ilara finished treating the wound, it placed a hand on its chest and made a series of musical chirps and clicks. "Lyra," Ilara repeated, guessing that this was the alien's name or some form of self-identification. "It's nice to meet you, Lyra. Though I wish it were under better circumstances." Lyra attempted to stand but swayed unsteadily. Ilara quickly moved to support the alien, noticing how light and fragile it felt. "Whoa, easy there. You've lost a lot of blood, or whatever that fluid is. We should get you somewhere safe to recover." Ilara glanced back in the direction she'd come from. Her ship wasn't too far, and it had much better medical facilities than her portable kit. But would Lyra trust her enough to go with her? As if sensing her thoughts, Lyra looked up at Ilara, those mesmerizing opal eyes seeming to peer into her soul. The alien made a soft trilling sound and nodded, leaning more of its weight against Ilara. "All right then," Ilara said with a smile. "Let's get you patched up properly." The journey back to the Stargazer was slow and careful. Ilara supported Lyra, mindful of the alien's injuries and the strange terrain. As they walked, she couldn't help but marvel at the situation. Here she was, light years from home, helping an injured alien from an unknown species. It was the stuff of science fiction, yet it was happening to her. When they finally reached the ship, Lyra hesitated at the airlock, eyes darting nervously between Ilara and the entrance. "It's okay," Ilara reassured, gesturing inside. "This is my home, at least while I'm out here exploring. It's safe, I promise." After a moment's consideration, Lyra nodded and allowed Ilara to help them inside. The alien's eyes widened as they took in the interior of the ship, head swiveling to take in all the unfamiliar technology. Ilara guided Lyra to the medical bay, helping the alien onto the examination table. "Aye," she called out, "run a full bioscan on our guest. Adapt parameters as necessary for non-human physiology." As the scan commenced, bathing Lyra in a soft blue light, Ilara found herself face to face with the reality of her situation. She had dreamed of first contact, of course. What space explorer hadn't? But the reality was far more complex and frightening than she had imagined. Here was a being from another world, injured and alone, now dependent on her. The weight of responsibility settled on Ilara's shoulders. It wasn't just about scientific discovery anymore. It was about compassion, about bridging the gap between two species who had never known of each other's existence until this moment. As the scanner beeped to signal the completion of its analysis, Ilara took a deep breath. Whatever came next, she knew her life, and possibly the future of human-alien relations, would never be the same. The AI's voice broke the silence. Scan complete. Subject displays significant physiological differences from known life forms. Immediate medical attention required for internal injuries. Ilara nodded, steeling herself for the task ahead. "All right, Lyra," she said, meeting the alien's swirling opal eyes. "Let's get you healed up. Then we can figure out what comes next." As she began to work, following the eye's guidance to treat Lyra's injuries, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of an adventure beyond her wildest dreams. Building trust. Days passed aboard the Stargazer as Ilara worked tirelessly to heal Lyra's injuries. The alien's physiology was fascinatingly different from anything Ilara had studied before, and she found herself constantly amazed by new discoveries. Lyra's blood, for instance, contained particles that seemed to shift and change under the microscope, adapting to different stimuli in ways that defied Earth biology. Communication remained a challenge, while Lyra seemed to understand that Ilara meant no harm. The language barrier between them was substantial. Ilara's translation software was useless against Lyra's musical language of chirps, trills, and clicks. Still, they managed to convey basic needs through gestures and facial expressions. One morning, as Ilara entered the medical bay with a tray of synthesized nutrients formulated for Lyra's unique digestive system, she found the alien sitting up and alert, those mesmerizing opal eyes fixed on her. "Good morning, Lyra," Ilara said with a smile, setting down the tray. "How are you feeling today?" Lyra tilted their head, a gesture Ilara had come to associate with curiosity. The alien pointed to their own chest and made a series of soft chirps, then pointed at Ilara questioningly. Ilara's brow furrowed for a moment before understanding dawned. "Oh, are you asking my name again?" She pointed to herself. "Ilara. I'm Ilara." Lyra's feather-like crest rippled, and the alien made a sound that was almost like laughter. "El-Ara." Lyra attempted, the name sounding strange and beautiful in their musical voice. Ilara's eyes widened in excitement. "Yes, that's right." She pointed to Lyra. "And you're Lyra, right?" The alien nodded, seeming pleased. It was a small step, but it felt like a giant leap in their ability to communicate. Over the next few days, they developed a rudimentary form of communication. Ilara would point to objects around the ship, naming them in English, and Lyra would respond with the corresponding word in their language. They created a game out of it, each trying to remember and pronounce the other's words, often dissolving into laughter at their mutual mispronunciations. As Lyra's strength returned, Ilara began to show them around the ship. The alien was fascinated by the technology, often spending hours examining the various systems and asking questions in their limited shared vocabulary. Ilara did her best to explain, using diagrams and simple demonstrations when words failed. One evening, as they sat in the ship's small dining area sharing a meal, Lyra suddenly became very still, their opal eyes fixed on the viewing port. Ilara followed their gaze and gasped softly. The twin suns of the alien world were setting, painting the sky in a breathtaking array of colors she had never seen before. Lyra made a soft, mournful sound, placing a hand on the transparent material of the port. Ilara didn't need a translation to understand the emotion behind the gesture. It was homesickness, a feeling she knew all too well. "You miss your home," Ilara said softly, placing a comforting hand on Lyra's shoulder. The alien leaned into the touch, and Ilara was struck by how natural it felt, how quickly they had grown comfortable with each other despite their vast differences. Lyra turned to her, those swirling opal eyes shimmering with what Ilara realized were tears. The alien began to speak, a stream of musical sounds that Ilara couldn't understand, but the emotion behind them was clear. There was fear, loneliness, and a deep sense of loss. Ilara listened, wishing desperately that she could understand, that she could offer more than just silent support. When Lyra finished, they looked at Ilara expectantly, as if hoping that somehow the meaning had gotten through. Ilara took a deep breath, then began to speak. She told Lyra about Earth, about the family and friends she had left behind to explore the stars. She described the ache of homesickness that sometimes gripped her in the quiet moments between discoveries, the way she wondered if she'd made the right choice in leaving everything behind. As she spoke, Ilara pulled up holographic images of Earth on the ship's display. Lyra watched in fascination as pictures of blue oceans, green forests, and bustling cities floated before them. When an image of Ilara's family appeared, a group photo taken just before she left on her mission, Lyra reached out as if to touch it, making a soft, wondering sound. Ilara pointed to each person in the photo, naming them. "That's my mother, Sarah, my father, David, and my little brother, Alex." She smiled softly, feeling a pang of longing. "I miss them every day." Lyra nodded solemnly, then hesitantly reached out and took Ilara's hand. The gesture was so human, so understanding, that Ilara felt tears prick at her eyes. In that moment, despite all their differences, she and Lyra were the same. Two beings far from home, finding comfort in each other's company. The next morning, Ilara woke to find Lyra already up and working at one of the ship's computers. The alien had picked up the basics of the system surprisingly quickly, and Ilara watched in amazement as Lyra's slender fingers danced over the holographic interface. "Good morning," Ilara said, approaching cautiously so as not to startle Lyra. "What are you working on?" Lyra turned, eyes bright with excitement. They gestured to the screen, which was filled with complex equations and diagrams. Ilara leaned in, her scientific curiosity piqued. As she studied the display, her eyes widened in realization. Are you trying to explain your language to me?" she asked, looking at Lyra in wonder. Lyra nodded enthusiastically, making a series of chirps and gestures. They pointed to a diagram that seemed to break down the structure of their language, showing how different sounds combined to form meaning. Ilara felt a rush of excitement. This was more than just an attempt at communication. It was Lyra actively trying to bridge the gap between their species. The alien was using advanced mathematics and linguistic theory to create a framework for translation. "This is incredible, Lyra," Ilara breathed, her mind racing with the possibilities. "With this, we might be able to create a proper translation system. We could really talk to each other." Over the next few weeks, Ilara and Lyra worked tirelessly on the translation project. It was painstaking work, filled with trial and error, but every small breakthrough felt like a victory. Ilara found herself in awe of Lyra's intelligence and creativity. The alien approached problems from angles she never would have considered, leading to solutions that seemed almost like magic. As they worked, Ilara also began teaching Lyra more about human culture and history. She showed documentaries, played music, and even introduced Lyra to some of her favorite books, using the ship's vast digital library. In return, Lyra began to share glimpses of their own culture through intricate drawings and haunting melodies sung in their native tongue. One day, as they were taking a break from their work, Ilara decided to address something that had been on her mind. "Lyra," she said carefully, "I've been wondering about your ship. Do you think it's time we tried to salvage what we can from it? There might be important data or technology that could help us understand each other better." Lyra was quiet for a moment, their opal eyes swirling with emotion. Then, slowly, they nodded. The next day, they made the journey back to the crash site. As they approached the wreckage, Ilara could feel Lyra tensing beside her. She placed a comforting hand on the alien's shoulder. "We'll go slowly, okay? If it becomes too much, we can leave at any time." Lyra gave a chirp of acknowledgement, and together they began to explore the crashed ship. Despite the damage, much of the alien technology was still intact. Ilara watched in fascination as Lyra interfaced with the ship's systems, downloading data and explaining as best they could what each piece of equipment did. As they worked, Ilara couldn't help but compare the alien technology to her own. In some ways, it was far more advanced. The organic, flowing designs seemed to blur the line between biology and machinery in ways that human science had only dreamed of. In other ways, Human technology had taken different paths, solving similar problems through vastly different means. They were nearly finished when Lyra suddenly froze, staring at a display with an expression Ilara couldn't quite interpret. "Lyra? What is it? What's wrong?" The alien turned to her, making a series of urgent chirps and gestures. Ilara shook her head, frustrated by her inability to understand. Lyra seemed to realize the problem and instead pointed to the ship's communication array, then up at the sky. Ilara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "A distress signal. Your people, they're coming for you." Lyra nodded, but there was no joy in the gesture. If anything, the alien looked afraid. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. There was clearly more going on here than a simple rescue. "Lyra," she said carefully, "why were you out here alone? What happened to make your ship crash?" For a long moment, Lyra was silent, those opal eyes swirling with a storm of emotions. Then, slowly, using a combination of their rudimentary shared language, gestures, and the translation system they'd been developing, Lyra began to tell their story. The tale that unfolded left Ilara reeling. Lyra, it turned out, was something of an outcast among their people. In a society that valued conformity and adhered to strict roles, Lyra's curiosity and desire for exploration were seen as dangerous. They had stolen the ship, fleeing from a life of imprisonment or worse, only to crash on this unknown world. The distress signal wasn't a beacon of hope, it was a threat. If Lyra's people arrived, they wouldn't be coming as rescuers, but as jailers. As the full weight of the situation settled over them, Ilara and Lyra stood in silence, the ruins of the alien ship looming around them. The peace they had found, the friendship they had built, was suddenly under threat. Ilara looked at Lyra, seeing not an alien being, but a friend in need. In that moment, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "We won't let them take you," she said firmly, taking Lyra's hand in her own. "Whatever happens, we're in this together now. I promise." Lyra's opal eyes shimmered with gratitude and something else, a warmth that made Ilara's heart skip a beat. As they made their way back to the Stargazer, a new sense of urgency in their steps, Ilara knew that their adventure was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Facing adversity. The Stargazer hummed with nervous energy as Ilara and Lyra raced against time. With the threat of Lyra's people looming, they had to act fast. Ilara's mind whirled with possibilities, each more desperate than the last. "We need to disable that distress signal," Ilara muttered, more to herself than to Lyra. She paced the bridge, running her hands through her dark hair. "But even if we do, they might already be on their way." Lyra watched her with those mesmerizing opal eyes, concern evident in their swirling depths. The alien's feather-like crest rippled with agitation. Using their still rudimentary shared language, Lyra conveyed an idea. "Hide." Ilara paused, considering. "Hide the ship, you mean? It's not a bad idea, but where? And for how long?" She shook her head, frustration mounting. "We need more information. We need to understand what we're up against." With renewed determination, Ilara turned to the ship's computer. "AI, analyze all the data we've gathered from Lyra's ship. I want to know everything about their technology, especially their space travel capabilities and tracking systems." As the AI worked, Ilara and Lyra huddled over the holographic display, poring over star charts and sensor readings. They needed to find a place to hide, somewhere that would shield them from detection long enough to come up with a more permanent solution. Hours passed in a blur of calculations and heated debate. Despite the language barrier, Ilara and Lyra worked in surprising harmony, each bringing their unique perspective and knowledge to the problem. Lyra's understanding of their own people's technology proved invaluable, helping Ilara identify weaknesses they could exploit. Finally, as the alien world's twin suns began to set once more, they had a plan. "There," Ilara said, pointing to a spot on the star chart. "This nebula. The radiation and dust should mask our energy signature. We can hide there while we figure out our next move. Lyra studied the chart, then nodded slowly. They made a series of clicks and chirps that Ilara had come to associate with agreement. "All right then," Ilara said, a grim smile on her face. "Let's fly." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Ilara pushed the Stargazer to its limits, racing toward the nebula at speeds that made the ship's hull creak in protest. Lyra worked tirelessly alongside her, their slender fingers dancing over the ship's controls with growing confidence. As they traveled, they continued to work on their communication. The translation system they had been developing became their lifeline, growing more sophisticated with each passing hour. Slowly but surely, the barrier between them began to crumble. It was during one of these intense work sessions that Lyra finally managed to fully explain the nature of their society. Ilara listened in growing horror as the alien described a rigid caste system, where every individual's role was determined at birth. Deviation was not just discouraged. It was treated as a kind of sickness to be cured or contained. "So when you left," Ilara said slowly, the pieces falling into place, "you weren't just leaving your home. You were rejecting your entire society." Lyra nodded, their opal eyes dimming with sadness. "No choice," they said in halting English. "Stay, become, not me. Leave, be free." Ilara felt a swell of admiration for her alien friend. The courage it must have taken to leave everything behind, to flee into the unknown rather than conform to a life that felt wrong. It was staggering. "You did the right thing," she said firmly, placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "And I promise you, we'll find a way through this, together." The moment was interrupted by a blaring alarm. Ilara's heart leaped into her throat as she rushed to the console. "No, no, no," she muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. "They couldn't have found us already." But it wasn't Lyra's people. The sensors had detected something else entirely. A massive solar flare erupting from a nearby star, sending a wave of deadly radiation directly toward their position. "Brace for impact," Ilara shouted, throwing herself into the pilot's seat. She fired up the engines, pushing them to full power in an attempt to outrun the approaching wave. The ship bucked and shuddered as the edge of the radiation wave hit them. Warning lights flashed across every console as systems began to overload. Ilara fought with the controls, trying to keep them on course, even as the radiation played havoc with their navigation systems. Beside her, Lyra worked furiously, their hands a blur as they rerouted power and shored up failing systems. Despite the danger, Ilara couldn't help but be impressed by how quickly the alien had learned to operate her ship. For what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they rode the wave of radiation, the ship groaning around them as it was pushed to its absolute limits. Finally, mercifully, they broke free, the sensors showing clear space ahead. Ilara sagged in her seat, exhaustion washing over her. "That," she said between heavy breaths, "was too close." Lyra made a sound that might have been agreement, their opal eyes wide with leftover adrenaline. But as Ilara turned to check on her friend, she noticed something alarming. Lyra's iridescent skin had taken on a sickly pallor, and they seemed to be having trouble focusing. "Lyra, are you all right?" Ilara asked, concern mounting as the alien swayed in their seat. Lyra tried to respond, but the words came out as a jumbled mess of clicks and chirps. Before Ilara could react, Lyra collapsed, falling limply to the floor of the bridge. "No," Ilara cried, rushing to Lyra's side. She gently turned the alien over, her heart racing as she noted the shallow breathing and feverish heat radiating from Lyra's skin. The radiation, it must have affected Lyra differently than it had her. With a strength born of desperation, Ilara lifted Lyra into her arms and carried them to the medical bay. She laid the alien gently on the examination table, her mind racing. How could she treat an alien physiology she barely understood for radiation poisoning? She called out, her voice tight with fear. Full bioscan on Lyra. Compared to previous scans, and highlight any anomalies. As the blue light of the scanner washed over Lyra's still form, Ilara found herself praying to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. She couldn't lose Lyra. Not now, not like this. The next few days were a blur of constant vigilance and desperate measures. Ilara barely slept, dividing her time between tending to Lyra and keeping the damaged ship on course. The radiation had fried several key systems, leaving them limping toward the nebula on auxiliary power. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness, their opal eyes clouded with pain when they were awake. Ilara did everything she could, synthesizing medicines based on her best guesses and the AI's recommendations. But Lyra's alien physiology made every treatment a gamble. As she worked, Ilara found herself talking constantly to Lyra, whether they were awake to hear it or not. She told stories of Earth, of her childhood dreams of exploring the stars. She described the wonders she had seen on her journey, the breathtaking beauty of nebula, and the awe-inspiring power of black holes. And in quiet moments, when the fear threatened to overwhelm her, she spoke of more personal things, of the loneliness she had felt before meeting Lyra, of the connection that had grown between them. "You can't leave me now," she whispered, holding Lyra's hand tightly. "We have too much left to discover together." It was during one of these vigils that the ship's proximity alert blared to life. Ilara's head snapped up, her heart pounding. Had Lyra's people found them? Were they about to be boarded? She rushed to the bridge, her fatigue forgotten in the surge of adrenaline. But what she saw on the sensors wasn't a ship. It was the nebula. They had finally reached their hiding place. A hysterical laugh bubbled up from Ilara's chest. They had made it, against all odds. Now, if only Lyra would recover, they might have a chance. As if in answer to her thoughts, a weak chirp came from the medical bay. Ilara sprinted back, hope rising in her chest. Lyra's eyes were open, the opal irises clearer than they had been in days. "Lyra," Ilara breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Can you hear me?" The alien nodded weakly, then slowly raised a hand to touch Ilara's cheek. The gesture was so tender, so human, that Ilara felt tears spring to her eyes. "Ilara," Lyra said, their voice rough but unmistakable. "Thank you." Ilara laughed through her tears, clasping Lyra's hand against her face. "You're going to be okay," she said, as much to reassure herself as Lyra. "We're going to be okay." As Lyra began to recover, Ilara guided the stargazer deeper into the nebula. The swirling clouds of gas and dust enveloped them, creating a cosmic shroud that hid them from prying eyes. For the moment, at least, they were safe. With the immediate danger past, Ilara and Lyra turned their attention to repairing the ship and planning their next move. The radiation damage had been extensive, and many systems were operating far below peak efficiency. It would take time to get everything back to normal, time they weren't sure they had. One evening, as they sat surrounded by dismantled components and holographic schematics, Lyra broached a subject they had both been avoiding. "Ilara," they said, their command of English improving daily, "what we do if my people find us?" Ilara sighed, setting down the circuit board she'd been working on. "I don't know," she admitted. "We can't outrun them forever, not in the stargazer's current state. And even if we could," she trailed off, the implications hanging heavy in the air between them. Lyra nodded solemnly. "Cannot run forever," they agreed. "Must find solution. Permanent." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Lyra spoke again, their voice soft but determined. Maybe we not run. Maybe we face." Ilara looked at Lyra in surprise. "Face them. But Lyra, they'll try to take you back. They might even see me as a threat, an alien corrupting one of their own." Lyra's feather-like crest rippled with determination. "Yes, but also chance to show them different way. Show them." They gestured between themselves and Ilara. "Show them this." Ilara's breath caught in her throat as she understood what Lyra was suggesting. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, to stand before an advanced alien civilization and argue for change, to use their own story as proof that different species could not only coexist, but form deep bonds. It was the kind of thing that could change the course of history, or get them both killed. But as Ilara looked into Lyra's opal eyes, saw the mix of fear and hope swirling there, she knew they had to try. Running wasn't a long-term solution. Sooner or later, they would be found. Better to face the future on their own terms. Okay, Ilara said, taking Lyra's hand in her own. Let's do it. Let's change the galaxy. As they began to plan, Ilara felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, something that could reshape the relationship between their species for generations to come. It was a monumental task, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But as she looked at Lyra, at this being from another world who had become so dear to her, Ilara knew that it was worth the risk. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And in that moment, with the nebula swirling around their battered ship like a cocoon of stardust, anything seemed possible. Growing bonds. The swirling colors of the nebula cast an otherworldly glow through the stargazers' viewing ports as Ilara and Lyra worked tirelessly to prepare for their confrontation with Lyra's people. Days blended into weeks, each passing moment bringing them closer to an uncertain future. As they repaired the ship and refined their plan, something else was growing between them, a connection that transcended their biological differences and the vast gulf of space that separated their homeworlds. It started small, with lingering glances and gentle touches that lasted a moment too long to be purely platonic. Ilara found herself mesmerized by the way Lyra's iridescent skin shimmered in the nebula's light, the aliens' graceful movements as they worked side by side. For Lyra's part, their opal eyes seemed to follow Ilara constantly, filled with a warmth that made Ilara's heart race. One evening, as they sat in the ship's small lounge area, poring over star charts and cultural data, Lyra suddenly placed a hand over Ilara's. The human looked up, startled by the intensity in Lyra's gaze. "Ilara," Lyra said, their musical voice soft but clear. "I feel something. For you. Is not normal for my people. Is more." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She had been grappling with her own growing feelings, but hearing Lyra voice them made them suddenly, startlingly real. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Lyra, are you sure? We're so different, from completely different worlds, and with everything that's happening." Lyra's feather-like crest rippled in what Ilara had come to recognize as a sign of determination. "Yes, different," they agreed. "But also same. Both explorers, both seek understanding. Both," they paused, searching for the right word. "Both free." The last word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Freedom. It was what had driven Lyra to flee their oppressive society, what had sent Ilara hurtling through the stars in search of new discoveries. And now, paradoxically, it was what allowed them to form this unexpected bond. Slowly, giving Lyra every chance to pull away, Ilara leaned forward. Their lips met, or rather, Ilara's lips met the soft, slightly vibrating surface that served as Lyra's mouth. The sensation was unlike anything Ilara had ever experienced, a tingling warmth that seemed to spread through her entire body. When they parted, Lyra's opal eyes were wide with wonder. "Is this kiss?" they asked, the word clearly one they had learned from Ilara's cultural databases. Ilara nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, it's a kiss, a human way of showing affection." "Was it? Okay." In response, Lyra leaned in again, initiating another kiss. This one lasted longer, both of them exploring this new facet of their relationship. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. "More than okay," Lyra said, their voice filled with a joy that needed no translation. From that moment on, their relationship took on a new dimension. They still worked diligently on their preparations, But now their days were interspersed with moments of tenderness and discovery. Ilara taught Lyra about human forms of affection, while Lyra shared the intricate courtship rituals of their own people. It wasn't always easy. Their physiological differences presented challenges, and there were moments of confusion and misunderstanding. But with each obstacle they overcame, their bond grew stronger. One night, as they lay together in the ship's small sleeping quarters, Lyra traced patterns on Ilara's skin with a slender finger. "Tell me," they said softly, "about Earth love. How humans choose mates." Ilara chuckled, the question bringing back memories of awkward teenage crushes and fumbling first dates. "It's complicated," she said, "and it's different for everyone. Some humans fall in love quickly, others take time. Some never do. But I think, at its core, it's about finding someone who understands you, who challenges you to be better, who makes you feel whole." Lyra was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then they said, "My people do not choose. Mates assigned for optimal genetic combination. No love, just duty." The sadness in Lyra's voice made Ilara's heart ache. She pulled the alien closer, marveling at how natural it felt to hold this being from another world. "That's not living," she said firmly. "That's just existing. You deserved better than that, Lyra. You deserved the chance to choose." Lyra's opal eyes met Ilara's, swirling with emotion. "I choose you," they said simply. The words hung in the air, a declaration and a promise all at once. Ilara felt tears prick at her eyes as the full weight of Lyra's statement hit her. This wasn't just about the two of them anymore. It was about proving that love could transcend the boundaries of species, of cultures, of entire solar systems. "I choose you too," Ilara whispered back, sealing the promise with a kiss. As their relationship deepened, so did their resolve to change the course of Lyra's society. They spent long hours discussing strategy, with Lyra providing crucial insights into their people's psychology and social structures. "My people fear change," Lyra explained one day as they pored over cultural data. "See it as threat to order. Must show them change can be good, can make us stronger." Ilara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to appeal to their sense of progress," she mused. "Show them that diversity, that connection with other species, can lead to advancements they never imagined." They decided to compile a database of human scientific and cultural achievements, focusing on areas where cooperation and diversity had led to breakthroughs. Ilara dug deep into her ship's archives, pulling up everything from the history of space exploration to breakthrough medical treatments. As they worked, Ilara couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. Months ago, she had been a lone explorer, drifting through the cosmos in search of discovery. Now she was planning to confront an advanced alien civilization, with an alien partner by her side who had become more dear to her than she ever could have imagined. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had left Earth seeking the unknown, and she had found it in ways she never could have predicted. Lyra wasn't just a scientific discovery. They were a revelation, a living proof that the universe was more wondrous and full of possibility than humanity had ever dreamed. One evening, as they were running simulations of possible first contact scenarios, an alert blared from the ship's communication array. Ilara and Lyra rushed to the bridge, their hearts pounding in unison. On the main view screen, a message flashed. It was heavily encrypted, but the origin was clear. It was from Lyra's people. "They found us," Lyra whispered, their voice a mix of fear and resignation. Ilara took Lyra's hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "We knew this day would come," she said, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." With trembling fingers, Ilara opened the message. As the encryption fell away, a stern face appeared on the screen, a being similar to Lyra, but older, their feather-like crest more elaborate, and their opal eyes hard and cold. The alien spoke, their words translated by the system Ilara and Lyra had painstakingly developed. "Wayward one," the voice intoned, Your flight ends here. You will return and face judgment for your actions. Comply, and the alien with you will be spared. Resist, and both of you will face the consequences of your defiance." The message ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Ilara turned to Lyra, seeing the conflict raging in those beautiful opal eyes. "This is it," she said softly. "Are you ready?" Lyra took a deep breath, their feather-like crest rippling with determination. "Yes," they said firmly. "Ready to show them. Show them love. Show them us." Ilara nodded, a fierce pride welling up in her chest. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. She turned back to the communication array, her fingers hovering over the controls. "Shall we invite them to talk?" Lyra placed their hand over Ilara's, and together they opened a channel to the approaching ship. As they waited for a response, Ilara felt a strange calm settle over her. They had prepared for this moment, had poured their hearts and souls into their plan. Now it was time to see if love truly could change the course of a civilization. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern-faced alien again. Before they could speak, Ilara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Greetings," she said, using the formal tones Lyra had taught her. "I am Ilara Chen of Earth, and I stand with Lyra as an equal and a partner. We request an opportunity to present our case before your people." The alien's opal eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting a human to address them in their own language. They recovered quickly, their expression hardening. "You have no standing here, alien. This is an internal matter." "No," Lyra interrupted, moving to stand beside Ilara. "Not internal. Universal. What we share changes everything. Please, Elder, listen. Just listen." For a tense moment, the Elder seemed to waver. Then, almost imperceptibly, they nodded. "You have one planetary rotation to prepare your case. We will convene a council to hear you. But be warned, if your words do not sway us, your fates are sealed." The transmission cut off, leaving Ilara and Lyra alone once more. They turned to each other, a mix of fear and hope reflected in both their eyes. "One rotation," Ilara murmured. "Not much time." Lyra's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "Enough time," they said with quiet confidence. "Enough time to show them love." As they set to work, finalizing their presentation and steeling themselves for the challenge ahead, Ilara felt a surge of determination. They were about to challenge the deeply held beliefs of an entire civilization. The odds were stacked against them, the dangers very real. But as she looked at Lyra, at this extraordinary being who had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined, Ilara knew that they had already won the most important battle. They had found each other across the vast expanse of space, had forged a bond that defied explanation. If they could do that, then maybe, just maybe, they could change the galaxy. With renewed purpose, they threw themselves into their preparations. The nebula swirled around them, a cosmic backdrop to their own private universe of two. Whatever the next rotation brought, they would face it together, united by a love that transcended the boundaries of worlds. A new beginning. The stargazer drifted silently through the swirling colors of the nebula, a tiny island of life and hope in the vast cosmic sea. Inside, Ilara and Lyra made their final preparations, the air thick with tension and anticipation. "Are you ready?" Ilara asked softly, her eyes searching Lyra's opal ones for any sign of doubt. Lyra's feather-like crest rippled with determination. "Ready," they replied, their musical voice steady. "Together, we show them new way." Hand in hand, they made their way to the airlock where a shuttle from Lyra's people's ship awaited them. As the door hissed open, Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This was it, the moment that would determine not just their fate, but potentially the course of interspecies relations for generations to come. The shuttle ride was tense and silent. The pilot, Another of Lyra's species kept shooting them curious glances, clearly struggling to comprehend the bond between the human and the wayward one. Ilara met each glance with a steady gaze, her hand never leaving Lyra's. As they approached the massive ship that served as the mobile seat of Lyra's government, Ilara couldn't help but marvel at its design. Unlike the sleek, utilitarian lines of human vessels, this ship was a work of art. Its hull flowed in organic curves, shimmering with an iridescence that reminded her of Lyra's skin. It was beautiful, but also alien and somewhat intimidating, much like the culture they were about to confront. They were led through winding corridors, past groups of aliens who stopped and stared as they passed. Ilara felt like a specimen under a microscope, but she held her head high. She was here not as a curiosity, but as an equal, a partner to one of their own. Finally, they arrived at a vast chamber. Tiered seating rose on all sides, filled with aliens of varying ages and elaborate crest designs. At the center was a raised platform where 7 elders sat, their opal eyes hard and evaluating. As Ilara and Lyra took their place on a smaller platform in the center of the room, a hush fell over the assembly. The lead elder, the one who had spoken to them via transmission, rose to address the gathered aliens. "We are gathered here to pass judgment on the one known as Lyra," the elder's voice rang out, "who has violated our most sacred laws by fleeing their assigned place and consorting with an alien species." The elder's gaze turned to Ilara, and to determine the fate of the human who has aided in this transgression. Ilara felt a ripple of fear run through her, but Lyra's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. "Before we pronounce judgment," the elder continued, a note of reluctance in their voice, "we have agreed to hear their appeal. Speak, wayward ones, and know that your words may seal your fate." Lyra stepped forward first, their voice clear and strong as they addressed their people. They spoke of the stifling nature of their society, of the hunger for knowledge and experience that had driven them to flee. They described their crash on the alien world, and how Ilara had saved them without hesitation, asking nothing in return. As Lyra spoke, Ilara watched the faces of the assembled aliens. Some looked outraged, others confused. But a few, particularly among the younger ones, seemed intrigued, even moved by Lyra's words. Then was Ilara's turn. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her words carefully chosen and rehearsed. She talked about humanity's long journey to the stars, about the challenges they had overcome and the wonders they had discovered. She spoke of the fundamental human belief in freedom and self-determination, and how it had driven their species to achieve great things. But the greatest discovery, she said, her voice ringing through the chamber, was not a new planet or a scientific breakthrough. It was the realization that we are not alone in the universe, that there are other beings out there, different from us in so many ways, yet similar in the things that truly matter. She turned to Lyra, her eyes shining with emotion. "In Lyra, I found not just an alien life form to study, but a kindred spirit, someone who shares my curiosity, my desire to learn and grow. Someone who has taught me that love knows no boundaries, not of species, not of culture, not even of the vast distances between stars." A murmur ran through the crowd at her words. The concept of love, as they were describing it, seemed foreign, even shocking to many. But Ilara pressed on, undeterred. "We stand before you not to challenge your ways, but to show you a new possibility. A future where our peoples can learn from each other, grow together, where the sharing of knowledge and culture can lead to advancements neither of us could achieve alone." As she spoke, holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing the data they had prepared. Images of human and alien technology side by side, complementing each other in ways that hinted at incredible potential. Cultural exchanges, scientific breakthroughs, artistic collaborations, all theoretical, but all tantalizing in their possibilities. "This is the future we can build together," Ilara concluded, her voice passionate. "Not as separate species, isolated in our own corners of the galaxy, but as partners, as friends, and yes, even as family." She turned to Lyra, and without hesitation pulled them into a kiss. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber, followed by a stunned silence. When they parted, Lyra spoke again, their voice thick with emotion. "This is not weakness," they said, addressing their people directly. "This is strength, love, choice. It makes us stronger, makes us better. Please, see this, understand this." For a long moment, the chamber was silent. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she waited, acutely aware that their lives hung in the balance. Finally, the lead elder spoke. "You have given us much to consider," they said, their voice carefully neutral. "We will deliberate on your words and your demonstration. You will be summoned when we have reached a decision." As they were led from the chamber, Ilara felt a mix of hope and fear churning in her stomach. They had said their piece, had laid bare their hearts and their vision for the future. Now, all they could do was wait. The hours that followed were some of the longest of Ilara's life. She and Lyra were kept in a small, featureless room, left alone with their thoughts and each other. They spoke little, both lost in their own reflections on what had transpired and what might come next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they were summoned back to the great chamber. The atmosphere was different this time. Tense, expectant. Ilara could feel the weight of countless eyes upon them as they took their place once more at the center of the room. The lead elder rose, their opal eyes unreadable. "We have deliberated long and hard on your words," they began. "What you propose goes against millennia of our traditions, our very way of life." Ilara's heart sank, but the elder wasn't finished. "And yet," they continued, "we cannot deny the potential in what you have shown us, the possibility of a future we had not imagined." The elder's gaze swept the chamber. "We are a people who pride ourselves on logic, on making decisions that benefit our society as a whole. And logic dictates that we cannot ignore the opportunities this partnership presents." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. The elder held up a hand for silence. "Therefore, we have reached a decision. Lyra, you will not be punished for your actions. Instead, you and the human Ilara will be tasked with establishing a cultural exchange program between our peoples. You will be our ambassadors to humanity, and humanity's ambassadors to us." Ilara felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her. She squeezed Lyra's hand, seeing her own emotions reflected in those swirling opal eyes. But the elder wasn't done. "However," they said, their voice stern, "this is an experiment, one that will be closely monitored. If at any point we deem this exchange to be detrimental to our people, it will be terminated immediately. Is this understood?" Ilara and Lyra nodded solemnly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a chance to prove that their vision of the future was possible. "Then go," the elder said, a hint of something almost like warmth creeping into their voice. "Show us this new path you speak of. Teach us, as we will teach you, and may the stars watch over your journey." As they left the chamber, surrounded by a buzz of excited conversation, Ilara felt as though she were floating. They had done it. Against all odds, they had changed the course of an entire civilization. "What now?" Lyra asked as they made their way back to the shuttle that would return them to the Stargazer. Ilara grinned, her mind already racing with possibilities. Now we have a galaxy to introduce to each other. We have bridges to build, mysteries to unravel, and a love to share with two worlds." She paused, a thought occurring to her. "But first, I think it's time I introduced you to my family on Earth. After all, if we're going to be ambassadors, we should start with the people closest to us, right?" Lyra's feather-like crest rippled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Meet family. Is. Big step, yes." Ilara laughed, pulling Lyra close. "The biggest. But after everything we've been through, I think we can handle it. Besides, wait until they see how you light up under Earth's sun. They're going to love you." As they boarded the shuttle, hand in hand, Ilara felt a sense of boundless possibility. They had started this journey as two lone explorers, cast adrift in the cosmic sea. Now they were so much more. Partners, ambassadors, pioneers of a new age of interstellar cooperation. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and obstacles to overcome. But as Ilara looked at Lyra, saw the love and determination shining in those opal eyes, she knew that together they could face anything the universe threw at them. As the shuttle detached from the alien ship and made its way back to the Stargazer, Ilara felt as though she could see the future unfolding before them. A future of shared knowledge, of cultural exchange, of love that transcended the boundaries of worlds. A future where humanity and Lyra's people worked side by side, exploring the cosmos and unraveling its mysteries together. It was a future born from a chance encounter, nurtured by compassion, and made possible by love. As they approached the Stargazer, their small ship that had become a symbol of all they had accomplished, Ilara smiled. Their greatest adventure was just beginning. The stars stretched out before them, infinite in their possibility, and hand in hand, two beings from different worlds, but with hearts beating as one, Ilara and Lyra prepared to take their first steps into a new dawn for both their peoples. The universe, vast and wondrous, awaited.